So if you've been with us for a couple of weeks, you will know that we're in a series that's called This is the Way. Okay, and we'll come to that in a second, but let's just get into the scriptures first. So if you've got a Bible or you've got an app, or you're just able to look on the screen there, it's quite small writing, but this is simply a couple of lines, a story that Jesus told. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. Now, many of you will know that I am a passionate Star Wars fan.
Really?
No, I know, you'd never have thought it. It sort of overflows out of me. I don't know why that is. And I said before, one of the memorable lines that comes out of the current faved TV show at the moment, The Mandalorian, is this is the way. And the way in Star Wars is pure fantasy. Please don't feel that I am getting muddled. I'm not. I do know that it is pure fantasy. But it is not a unique name for a religious community. The first 100 years after the death, resurrection and ascension of Jesus Christ, his followers refer to themselves as the way. Okay, and the way was likely connecting to Jesus' own words when he said of himself, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. And these followers of the way saw themselves as ambassadors, commissioned by Jesus with a single purpose, which we can read in 2 Corinthians 5:20. It says this, we are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. Now, reconciled is not a word we use every day unless you're in accounting, but it assumes that there has been a falling out between two parties, and to be reconciled is to restore that friendship. Christians believe that being reconciled to God is the key to hope. It unlocks the potential of who you're designed to be and opens up the wisdom to do life with skill. And I guess the purpose of this short series of talks is really to continue the legacy, is to help you to continue to the legacy of being Christ's ambassadors, that you might be able to share the good news of Jesus with confidence. And we're doing this in a practical way. I'm giving you things to do. So I want to say that this morning, that the best way to share the good news is through your story. Life is a story. Life doesn't come to us like a maths problem to be solved. Life comes to us like a story, scene by scene. You have to enter into life, take the journey as it comes. Life unfolds like a drama. Every day has a beginning and an end. There are all sorts of characters and all sorts of settings to interact with. There are seasons in life that come like chapters in a novel. Sometimes it's like a tragedy. Sometimes it's like a comedy. Most of the time, it's like a soap opera. Whatever happens, it's a story through and through. When we're born, there is a blank book that slowly gets written over time, and at the other end of this mortal life, excerpts of that story are recalled and shared by friends and family. When your friend turns up at the door, upset and with tears in their eyes, isn't the first question out of your mouth, what's happened? You're asking them to tell you their story. When you sit around the dinner table and recall past adventures, inevitably that story of when you built that giant snowman that over the next days melted into that unfortunate shape comes up, and everyone laughs because that story is part of your shared history, and its telling strengthens relationships. But you are not the central character in your story. A lot of people make this mistake. We instinctively tend to live our lives and make our decisions based on this false premise. You perhaps have aspirations for your life. They might be simply to eat well and finish the next level of your video game. They might be slightly bigger than that. It might be for a family, a job, a car, or a home. Your ambitions might be even bigger than that. They might be for success, influence, wealth, power. Whatever your dream, it can be boiled down to this. You want to live your best life. But you're not the central character of your story. God is. If your experience is that God is real to you, then you will know that following him brings immense value to your life. That value you're experiencing is what Jesus calls life to the full. That's what we talked a little bit about last week. Do you recognize the good that comes from following Jesus? Remember from last week, you can only give away what you have. Yes, I'll happily admit that sometimes that full life isn't always easy. There are potholes and tripping hazards. But my overall experience is that it is good, that it's better than good, it's abundant. Not everyone experiences all of these things, but a life of following Jesus can build a sense of belonging. It can offer guidance on how to live a purposeful and meaningful life. There's the development of character, instilling values of honesty, kindness, and other-centeredness. Those values can be a framework in which to build an ethical and honourable lifestyle for individuals and for families. They give an opportunity to serve and do good and develop friendships. And it's a well-attested scientific fact that being part of a faith community positively impacts your health, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So those that follow Jesus experience this life to the full by following the most important rule of life. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and love your neighbour as yourself. It's quite clever, really, because to live a full life, you have to deliberately stop being the central character of your story. Of course, any humble person can do that, but as it said, nature abhors a vacuum. Something will inevitably fill the gap. And this is where Jesus comes in and says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. In other words, he is saying that he is the only person worthy of being in that gap. And that changes the posture of your life. Other people are no longer in orbit around you. You are, in fact, in orbit with other people around God. Now, given what Elon Musk is doing on a regular basis, there are now currently some 5,000 satellites in orbit around Earth. Each has a reason for being there, launched from Earth for the purpose of communication. That purpose would not make sense if it wasn't for the thing they're actually orbiting around, which is the Earth. Without Earth, they're just very expensive pieces of equipment going around in a circle. In the same way, you and I are launched from God with a purpose to communicate. Our purpose would not make sense if it wasn't for the central thing we are orbiting, God himself. Like a satellite, we receive and broadcast the values and practices of God. So bear with me. Let's assume for a moment we're a bit like satellites orbiting God. Got that little image? You're floating in space. Boop, boop, boop. If a satellite is not in the right orbit, it tends to face all sorts of mishaps. It gets in a tiz. The purpose of telling our story is to inform others on how to find their right orbit. And the hope is that something of our story inspires them to shift their course. So how do we tell our story? Well, I find there are two usual ways and one unusual way to tell your story. The unusual situation is my situation. I have the privilege of a public platform to share my story. It's a pretty good story. I do say so myself. I've shared it dozens of times. It's reasonably well crafted by now. And I'm used to sharing it. Some people would say it's a long story. Now, most of us don't get a public platform to share our story or to share our long story, which is why it's unusual. The more usual story is the short story. The more usual short story comes out when I'm meeting people for the first time or when I'm with people I've known for a long time. Usually something very normal comes up and I might see or do something in a different way to others and questions get asked. And I call them 1 Peter 3 moments. Because 1 Peter 3 verse 15 says this, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect." So in both of the usual ways in which we share our story, there are important things to draw upon from this passage. So the first one, lifestyle matters. So at the beginning of the verse it says this, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord." Your life is a display board for Jesus. People will be looking at you and saying, is there congruence between what you say and what you do? Does what you say match what you do? Great question to ask yourself. Now, don't panic, because almost automatically everyone goes, "Oh no, it doesn't." Okay? And I want to say that everyone's faith is awkward and stumbling. Okay, nobody drifts through this life having this perfect matching faith. Okay, well, Jesus did, but we know from Peter that he didn't, and he was pretty close to Jesus. All right, so we know that there is awkward and stumbling moments, and most people are forgiving of those moments. But what they want to know is, where is your heart in it? Where is your heart in it? See, you communicate best out of the overflow of your heart. So what overflows out of you? In my case, I'm wearing the t-shirt. Okay? Now, I'm deliberately doing this because you all know that I've got a passion for Star Wars, but I hope you also know that I've got a passion for Jesus. Okay? And I'm just using this as an example. All right? I'll let you decide which is in order, but But as I said last week, it's very hard to get half-full Christians to overflow. Yeah? It's really hard to get half-full Christians to overflow. Do you want to be full to overflowing? Great question to ask, isn't it? Honest question to ask. How full are you? Are you a half-full Christian? So lifestyle matters. Always be prepared. Education apparently prepares you for life. That's why you currently go to school, or you went to school. I guess for most of us here, or some of us may have been homeschooled. Who knows? Because it prepares you for life. When you go on holiday, you pack. It's the preparation you need for travel. At the very least, you take your passport. When you go and visit Great Auntie Mabel, you prepare by making sure you've got enough fuel in your car to get you to Great Yarmouth or wherever Great Auntie Mabel lives. So why don't we prepare for when people ask us about our faith? We prepare in all other ways for all other aspects of life. Why don't we prepare for when people ask us about our faith? Now, it might be, I was having a think about this, what this is all going to be about. And it might be that we don't think that the question is going to come up. And if it does, then we'll wing it. Okay? It might also be that we hope the question doesn't come up. And if it does, we'll dodge it. Can I suggest there might be a third way? That we pray that the questions come up and we answer them. Is it that we actually become intentional. So what might the question be? It might be the classic, so why are you a Christian? It has been my experience that that question very rarely comes up. Okay, I actually asked that question of the guy who actually led me to the Lord. So I can't say the question never comes up. But I would say in my multiple decades of being a Christian, I've never been asked that question. Now, of course, that could be me, you know. However, it's more likely to be that there are different questions that get asked. Why do you think it will be different? What did you do that for? Why have you not joined in? Explain to me why you spoke to that person in that way. Don't your friends do that? Tell me why you seem to be able to cope with that situation. It could be those questions or 100 others. When it comes to those moments, I find it helpful. This is the practical bit. This is the practical bit. And I think when we get to that bit, it's good, when we get to those questions, it's good to think of just have three things going on in your head. What was, what happened, what now? What was, what happened, what now? We're going to do this together, okay? What was, you can say it after me, what was, what happened, what now? What was, what happened, what now? Very good. For example, a question might have been asked of me, Steve, that would have really wound me up. How are you so calm? Well, what was? I used to have real anger moments, slamming doors and getting frustrated. But since I became a Christian, what happened? That changed. I haven't felt as angry. What now? And since I've been a Christian, I've learned that anger isn't helpful. And so I make an effort to control myself when I can. What was? What happened? What now? Now, I'm pretty sure that answer is not going to inspire anyone straight away to give their life to the Lord. Okay? But that's not the point. It's not about winning. It's about informing. It's about being honest. You see, this Christian stuff actually does make sense. You can be confident in that. I think most of us just don't feel quite confident. And I want to encourage you that it does make sense. See, people might argue theory with you, but they can't argue against your experience. Each answer helps others discover who it is that they're orbiting. Now, as J. John says, most of us are like Arctic rivers, frozen at the mouth. So to stop freezing, what we do is prepare. We rehearse some answers. You see, most of us don't actually reflect on why we think or why we do think. We just sort of instinctively do it. And maybe it's just right to stop and pause and think, oh, why is it that I do that? So I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that now. So I'm going to put three questions up that you might face. And what I want you to do is to think about what your answer might be to these questions. What was, what happened, what now? Okay, those are the three things you need to think about. First question. I noticed you said that you would pray for that person. What did you mean by that? Second question. How are you so positive? I mean, look around you. It's all a bit rubbish at the moment. Third question. You seem to spend a lot of time doing church stuff. Why is that? Okay, three questions there. What I want you to do, just choose one. Just choose one, and in your head, think of an answer. What was? What happened? What now? Now, you'll be pleased to know, I was going to ask you to go and find someone and tell them that. That's what you're all fearful of, wasn't it? Yeah, you were waiting for that. But you'll be pleased to know I've overrun in time, so I can't do that. But what I want you to do, okay, people are going to ask you questions. I really hope they do. Okay, they should be asking you questions. Because your lifestyle there should be elements of your lifestyle that are different to other people, and they'll be asking questions. And I want you to remember what was, what happened, what now. Maybe if your spouse, mum, dad, or whatever's in this place at the moment, you could maybe share your answer when you get home. Consider that a little bit of homework. What's really important here is that sharing your story is not just about tricks and tips on how to do life well. Okay? It's about helping others to see who it is they orbit. So our next talk in this series, we will look at that bigger picture. Okay? Thirdly, gentleness and respect. I'll rattle through these as quick as I can now. We face this tension as Christians. On one hand, we want to be prophetic. And by that, what I mean is that we want to be salt and light to our world. We know how valuable following Jesus is, the impact it has on our own lives, and we want to advocate for that. We want to display that. However, we also want to be pastoral. We want to be kind. And as I said before, if we're known for what we are against more than for what we are for, we've already lost. Part of the wisdom of doing life is to know when to be prophetic, when to stand up, and when to be pastoral, when to be kind. Let me finish with a story of my own, about a diamond merchant. A rich Dutch collector was seeking to buy a diamond of a certain kind to add to his collection. A famous dealer in New York found such a stone and called him to come and see. The merchant flew immediately to New York, where the seller had assigned his best diamond expert to close the transaction. After hearing the assistant describe in perfect detail the diamond's worth and beauty, the Dutchman decided not to buy it. Before he left, however, the famous dealer stepped forward and asked, "Do you mind if I show you that stone once more?" The customer agreed. The famous dealer didn't repeat one thing that the salesman had said. He simply took the stone in his hand, stared at it, and described the beauty of the stone in a way that revealed why this stone stood out from all the others that he had seen in his life. The customer bought it immediately. Securing his purchase away, the customer commented to the diamond dealer, "Sir, I wonder why you were able to sell me this stone when your salesman could not." The famous dealer replied, "This salesman is the best in the business. He knows more about diamonds than anyone, including myself, and I pay him a huge salary for his knowledge and expertise. But I would gladly pay him twice as much if I could put something into him that he lacks. You see, he knows diamonds, but I love them." When it comes to sharing your faith with confidence, the issue is not so much about how much you know, it's about how much you love. Let's pray.